for some political parties that have sponsors and
lasted until 2014.
Members of members in the National Assembly and
member of the National Assembly
have problem with that.
Receiving
like a young man who wants to be governor, you have lofty ideas.
The judge
with a political, with a flag
determined
bearer of a political party on a platform
that person must refund all the payments
so the person
that had been made to him. But
see,
of course, knowing our legislature,
and
the
low average Nigerians in the election, and that is why we keep having problems. Somebody may have the money, but he have no idea of what he wants to do for the people.
Democratic institution
is you don't know what you want to do. What is your manifesto? And that is why we keep having problems. So I think
election management bodies or electoral commissions, which are independent, impartial, and prepare for and conduct elections with integrity, are necessary institutions at the core of desirable and sustainable democratic development and of course good democratic governance. In Nigeria, INEC, the Independent National Electoral Commission, and CS, the State Independent Electoral Commissions, which prepare for and conduct elections at the federal and state levels respectively, are persistently bedeviled by many challenges, which in spite of strenuous reform efforts to address, continue to undermine and or question the integrity and credibility of elections. More reforms are required to further strengthen the independence and the role of EMBs in Nigeria to engender the quest for free, fair, and credible elections. In this regard, the following additional reform measures are necessary and desirable and should be given urgent attention. 1. There is need for increase in the use of technology in elections for transparency and accountability. For example, there is also the need to improve upon the provisions of Electoral Act 2022 to make electronic transmission of results mandatory. 2, there is need to ensure transparent testing of electoral technologies because a lot of lack of public trust relates to the haphazard manner in which they were introduced without popular participation in the testing of these equipments before they are deployed to the field. It's very, very important that there is a transparent process of civil engagement in testing these equipments before they are deployed. Thirdly, there is also need to clarify ambiguities pertaining to the provision in the 2022 Electoral Act regarding electronic transmission of results. For example, there is need to remove ambiguity in Section 64 of the Electoral Act in respect of the stages for comparing physical and electronic results. 4, there is need to review the appointment process for INEC chairman, national commissioners, and resident electoral commissioners in order to remove or at least minimize executive presidential influence and interference in the electoral process. And certainly doing this will further strengthen the independence of the electoral commissions. Justice Mohammed Dawal Uwais, who unfortunately died last Friday, former Chief Justice of the Federation, chaired the Electoral Reform Commission, and there were very good recommendations in that report about how to appoint the chairman, the resident electoral commissioners of INEC by minimizing political interference by ensuring that even the perception of he who pays the piper dictates the tune would be eliminated if we sanitize the appointment process. It is not necessarily so that persons appointed by the president may turn around and do the bidding of those who appointed them, but the perception in Nigeria is so deep even now that whoever appoints is likely to manipulate. So we need to avoid even that perception by having a very transparent process of appointing people with integrity, who are impartial, who are non-partisan, and who can withstand the pressure and inducement from our very reckless politicians, particularly those in governance, in executive positions. 5, there is also need to professionalize other INEC appointments, such as resident electoral commissioners at the state level, to permit INEC as a commission to be responsible for hiring and firing this. And I can tell you, when I was in INEC, there were some resident electoral commissioners who were appointed by Mr. President as I was appointed by Mr. President. And they therefore felt that they are not accountable to the commission or to me as the chairman, because they think that they have another power base. And the only way we could manage those reckless people who believe that their power backers would protect them is, when it comes to election, send them on holiday and bring other people to conduct the elections. So, but I think the best thing is that while the appointment process of the chairman and the commissioners is made very transparently and with minimal role by the president and the chief executive, and there are many African countries that have a very transparent process of appointing chairmen and commissioners of electoral commissions. So we must learn from those and try to do it, and at least that will make our electoral commissions more independent, more credible. People with integrity will be brought in. And once you do that, then you allow the commission to appoint lower level officials and to fire them, give them the power to hire and fire. So then political parties, that's the focus. I have so many, maybe I will just do political parties because I don't want to take too much time. Political parties provide, we must ensure, we all know the challenges of our political parties. The incredible power of so-called, what do we call them, godfathers or money bags that control the political recruitment process in terms of who are fielded for, to office, who contest elections, and making, basically, not making, removing any democratic content in the internal affairs of political parties, and particularly in terms of the conduct of primaries and the appointments, the selection of candidates who run for election. So it's very, very important that we pay attention to that. And I think that it's important, for example, to ensure that political parties are up and doing in many fundamental respects. One area is to ensure that there are sanctions to restrict the application of all political parties who fail to submit register of members 30 days before the primaries. The electoral management bodies, particularly at the federal level, are expected to monitor party primaries to ensure compliance, but political parties literally refuse to provide the register of members for those who are participating in the primaries. And if you don't have a register of members, you don't know whether the people who come as delegates are actually members of political parties or people who are recruited and paid to come and participate in the process. So I think that fundamental deliberate omission by political parties which constrain the monitoring role of the electoral commissions need to be addressed. There must be penalties for parties who refuse to provide, as the law requires, their register of members for the purpose of monitoring primaries at least 30 days before the election. We must also, and this is a very, very dangerous phenomenon that is undermining the integrity of our elections. We need to proscribe cross-carpeting, particularly for elected executives and the legislators. And we need to empower the Electoral Commission at the federal level and at CS at the state level to prepare for and conduct by-elections as soon as they have evidence about elected people cross-carpeting. The challenge in the existing legislation is that while the law categorically says that if you cross-carpet, you lose your seat, but another provision in the law says that INEC can only conduct elections to fill the vacancies when their seats are declared vacant by the speakers of either the State Assembly or the Federal House of Representatives or the Senate President. Now, invariably, these people move from smaller parties into the parties that are already in control of the legislatures, and they refuse to declare the seats vacant. And it's just impunity, really, in the ways and the manners in which they address this. And I will not mention names, but when I was at INEC, I took interest in how the Senate was trying to protect a senator who won an election under a small party, relatively small party, but once he got to Senate and was sworn in, he now quickly cross-carpeted to the major party in control of the Senate. Luckily, that small party was in control of the state. So they now made a lot of noise, put a lot of pressure, and the Senate President had to take the matter to the Ethics Committee of the Senate. And they now wrote to INEC whether there is a crisis in the party that compelled that senator to cross-carpet. And we went, I said I took interest because I knew it is impunity. So we went and we proved to the Senate Ethics Committee that there was no crisis in that party. And therefore, they should just authorize, that they declare the seat vacant so that an election can be conducted. It never happened. They just ignored it. And that's now why we are seeing the impunity now. You see now even elected governors are decamping into other parties 2 years into their tenure. So we really need to address this issue of cross-carpeting and decamping by elected officials. Thirdly, we also need to strictly regulate campaign finances and, if possible, have an agency to monitor and enforce penalties. INEC is doing so much. That's why late Justice Way's committee recommended what they call unbundling of the Electoral Commission, because it has so much to do and it's so spread that it can't do a lot of these things effectively. Monitoring campaign finances, There was a few electoral commissions that are very good in doing that. I think the Indian Electoral Commission is very good in doing that. But in Nigeria, INEC is to do that, to also prosecute electoral offenders and so on and so forth. So I believe if we want to make strict monitoring and regulation of campaign finances, we need to take that responsibility away from the Electoral Commission and give it to another agency. And that was what the Ways Committee considered and called as unbundling of INEC, so that it can concentrate on preparation and conduct of elections. Quickly, press and the media. I think we need to strengthen the capacity and independence of the media to report responsibly by ensuring strict compliance with the Freedom of Information Act and with stiff penalties for non-compliance. We also need to introduce stiff penalties against irresponsible reportage, especially deliberate and willful circulation of misleading and false information and hate speeches. We also need to encourage the creation and signing of codes of conduct by journalists, by proprietors of print and broadcast and electronic media, and we also need to ensure strict compliance of this. Now, the executive branch. The Nigerian executive branch is arguably the most active, if not the most important of the three branches of government. And in many countries, it is so, relative to the other branches. But in Nigeria, it is responsible for policy formulation, policy execution in terms of programs and projects, planning and implementation, as well as in enforcing laws and maintenance of law and order in the country. Ideally, the executive branch works together with the judicial and legislative arms of government, sharing power and serving as checks and balances in promoting good democratic governance and accountability. In Nigeria, however, largely because of a long history of military rule, the executive branch has become a behemoth, overdeveloped relative to the other two branches, and relatively more inefficient and unaccountable, and exercising what one would call bad influence on the other two branches of government, which appear to lack the capacity or inclination to check and balance its power. The powers of the executive branch generally, and that of the presidency at the federal level and governors at the state level, need to be curtailed more effectively. Its activities and functions or discharge of responsibilities made much more transparent and accountable. And reforming this branch of government should begin with the following, in my view. Removing the immunity for governors from prosecution. Because really this immunity has made some of them, maybe even many of them, to be more reckless and unaccountable in the way in which they manage public resources at the state level. 2, making the management of security votes much more transparent and accountable. Thirdly, sanitizing appointment of assistants, special assistants, senior special assistants, special advisors, and so on. A situation in which a governor or president could appoint 400 special advisors and so on and so forth is clearly wasteful. It's clearly patronage. It has nothing to do with service in terms of efficiency or accountability, or even in terms of prudence in the management of public resources. The seventh issue I want to talk about is voting rights and inclusivity. It's not an institutional issue, but it is something that can help in improving the competence and activities of our democratic institutions. So I won't say much about this, but certainly nobody will doubt that there is need for increased representation of women, of youth, and some would say even with persons with disabilities, by creating quotas for them in representative assemblies. In conclusion, thank you for your patience. There are many things a country such as Nigeria, with several decades of bastardization of democratic development and facing the possibility of authoritarian reversal, can do to reposition itself and pursue the path and trajectory of sustainable democratization and democratic development. These include nurturing, imbibing, and entrenching democratic political culture and reorientation among the citizenry, building new generation of democrats, and building and strengthening democratic institutions, which I paid greater attention to in this presentation. Remarkable democratic value addition that can contain authoritarian rules and bring about good democratic governance could best be got by undertaking essential reforms that are targeted at building and strengthening critical democratic institutions in the country. This may seem a difficult undertaking, but it is not impossible to do so. In any case, it is a necessary task that must be done. Thank you very much.
The year was 1993. The date, June 12. Millions of Nigerians are turned out to vote in what would be declared the freest and fairest election in Nigeria's history. The man they chose in a landslide was Chief Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, popularly known as MKO Abiola. But just days later, the military government of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida annulled the June 12 election.
It is true that the presidential election was generally seen to be free, fair, and peaceful. However,
plunging the nation into a crisis. General Babangida would later hand over power in August 1993 to an interim national government headed by late Chief Ernest Shuneko.
It is with a deep sense of responsibility that once again I accept the challenge to serve as the head of the interim national government of the Federal Republic.
Without acknowledging the clear victory of MKO Abiola at the June 12 polls. Enter General Sani Abacha, who seized power from Chief Shuneko in November 1993, also refusing to recognize the June 12 victory.
Government in its magnanimity never gave him serious attention. His most recent action of declaring himself the president and commander...
In a bold and defiant move, MKO Abiola would declare himself president on the eve of the first anniversary of the June 12 elections in what is now known as the Ewetedu Declaration. His words, enough is enough.
Matters relating to the election should have gone to the tribunal set up by law for such cases, and should only conclusion unfortunate but inescapable that the federal military government is guilty of bad faith, pure and simple. No one has accused me of any offense against any known electoral law or regulation. The people of this country went to polls on Saturday, June 12, 1993, and without let or hindrance chose me as their president. Didn't they?
Chief Abiola was subsequently arrested by the Abacha regime and died in custody on July 7, 1998, the day of his release. In 1999, after Abacha's death and one final year of military rule under General Abdulsalami Abubakar, Nigeria returned to democratic governance with retired General Olusegun Obasanjo sworn in as a civilian president on May 29, 1999. And so for 18 years, May 29th stood as Nigeria's official Democracy Day. Until President Muhammadu Buhari, in a rare act of national healing, honored the mandate that history once denied.
We accept not just the award and the apology, but we'd like to thank you for the great honor you have done to our father.
And recognized June 12 as Nigeria's True Democracy Day. Today, June 12 stands as a symbol of Nigeria's democratic resilience. 26 years of uninterrupted civilian governance, with each successive election, however imperfect, building on the legacy of June 12, 1993. Happy Democracy Day, Nigerians, and long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Not just the award and the apology, but we'd like to thank you for the...
Democracy Day, Nigerians, and long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
We're still live at the platform Nigeria. Please remember that you can join in the panel discussions by asking your questions using the short link bit.ly/platform June 12. That's bit.ly/platform June 12. You can also join the conversation online using the hashtag the platform June 12. Our next speaker is His Excellency Babatunde Raji Fashola. Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola is a former Federal Minister of Power, Works and Housing who served from 2019 to 2023. He has also served as a two-time governor of Lagos State from 2007 to 2015. A proud Lagos audience we have here. He is a senior advocate of Nigeria and recipient of several honors and awards, including the Award for Excellence in Leadership by Martin Luther King Jr. Foundation in 2010, as well as the Commander of the Order of the Niger, conferred by His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari in 2022. Please join me as we welcome back to the platform Nigeria, His Excellency Babatunde Raji Fashola.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I think a good place to start is to just observe a moment of silence for all of the people who sacrificed, paid the ultimate price for the very important day that we now gather to commemorate and the freedoms that come with this day. Just say a word of prayer, a moment of silence for their souls. May the souls of the departed martyrs of June 12 continue to rest in peace. You know, I say this, I chose to start here because perhaps some of us in this hall were too young or were not even born to contextualize what happened before June 12, what happened after that election, and why this is such a big deal. Liberties and freedoms, they were so important. And why should June 12 even be an issue? All that we had was an election, wasn't it? So, but what happened was that in the middle of it all, when everything seemed to be going well, some people decided to change the rules, abridge the rule of law. After the rules were set. And that is why it is really a pleasure for me to be here again at the invitation of Pastor Poju Oyemade on the platform to speak for only 30 minutes, out of which 3 are gone, on the topic, the role of the rule of law in our national development. It's a very important subject. So, if the rule of law had prevailed, there would have been no crisis on June 12th. MKO would have been president. And perhaps all of his promise about farewell to poverty would have happened, right? Can you already see the connection? Rule of law, national development. That's my topic. So I'm just going to adopt a simple definition which says that all people and all institutions within a political body are subject to the same laws. It simply means no one is above the law. All of us are equal, or we are to be treated equally. Even government is not above the law. That's what it means. But is this really the case? Really? Okay, so let's quickly go. So, and that's why I say, well, you say no, and that's maybe, and maybe not. I think we must accept some of the privileges that some enjoy, perhaps as a result of the work that they do. The speaker before me, Professor Jega, has alluded to the removal of the immunity clause. Well, really and truly, I have no new position on the matter, but they come with consequences. So, because of the work some people do, they are sometimes not immediately subject to the consequences of what they have done. And I want us to see the rule of law in terms of law and order. That's really the perspective that I want to share. So those privileges may confer some preferential treatment, and they may suggest that some people are more powerful than others, but I take the view that those privileges do not place them above the law. So I cite one example. There's a country whose former head of government, and I'm not going to name the country, you can find it yourself. So he committed some offenses while he was a politically exposed person lower on in his political career. He was later to rise to national leadership, and at that time they couldn't touch him. When he left office, of course, the prosecution started, he was convicted. Then the problem arose. Which prison were they going to send him to? Because they then realized that he had state secrets in his head, so they couldn't keep him with common criminals. And so they had to build him a special prison, wing of a prison in their existing prison. Are we still equal before the law? The law has ultimately caught up with him. He couldn't initially. But even after they caught up with him, they still realized that this man can't be kept with common criminals. He must serve prison in a special cell. So I move on again to what I want to do now is to animate the concept, not as an idealistic concept, but a real-life issue. So the rule of law is so important because it is what separates us from animals. That's why we are equal. That's why Governor Soludo cannot come now and seize my car because he's now governor. But you know, in the animal world, he can. Because there, might is right. And you know who gave us the rule of law? The Romans. And the ancient Roman Empire at its splendor was built on the rule of law. But the empire began to crumble. And why did it crumble? Simply because they began to turn their backs on their greatest gift to the human civilization. And if you want to pursue that further, go and read about Emperor Caligula. But the rule of law is not some fancy concept. It's not a legislative thing or a lawyer thing. It is about lives, it's about livelihoods, and it's about the quality of life. So it's a great determinant whether a country or a state or a local government is safe or unsafe. And that will determine whether it is a place to start a family, that will determine whether it is a place to work, or whether it's a place to start a business. One of the indicators of poverty or prosperity is the rule of law, because it also impacts on the decision whether to invest or whether to divest. The dominion of law helps wealth managers and managers of capital to decide where to move capital. So it's not just a government thing, it's an all of us thing. Can we say that? It's an all of us thing. So, how government responds to her responsibility regarding the security of lives and property is one part of the spectrum of that all of us thing. The other part of the spectrum is our own conduct as citizens. So let us connect a few dots between the rule of law, the cost of living, and the cost of doing business in our land. How many of us have experienced state and non-state actors standing along transport corridors and collecting essentially undocumented and unaccountable tolls? Are we familiar? But you know what happens? All of those costs that trader BRF pays in order to get his goods to market will ultimately be passed to Professor Jega and to Dr. Ameenah and to Mrs. Oyemade and to all of us. But once there is that failure on the road, you collect illegal tolls, it affects cost of living. That's one dot. I will move very quickly because time is not our friend. Lawlessness and lawfulness, aspects of the rule of law, they have cost consequences. If you do a Google search today about the cost of producing oil, crude oil, you will see that it varies in some parts from as low as $12 per barrel and goes as high as $40 per barrel. Now, what does that mean? Some of the impacts of high costs is vandalism of oil assets, pipelines. So in that environment where the rule of law is not prevalent, production costs will certainly go up. Now, a barrel of crude oil probably trading at $60 per barrel today. So if you are in pipeline vandalism era, net profit will be just $20. But if you are in an arena where there is no pipeline vandalism, there are no challenges, production cost is $12. Net profit is $48. You see the difference? Again, these are real life issues. and there are issues that concern you and they concern me. But beyond net profit is gross national income. Add that to total amount producible. Because once the pipelines are damaged, not only does it increase the cost of production, it reduces how much you can push out. So volume is affected. Another part of that spectrum is that where there is absence of law and order, it repels human capital. People seek safety. Our first speaker has told us about the need to bring home some of our best minds and best brains. But they will come without any invitation. The more compliant we are with our own rules, the more safe they feel, the more predictable our environment becomes. Road traffic behavior. You say as a barometer for gauging the preeminence of rule of law is yet another area to think about. So, how many big men are here who are operating unregistered vehicles? It sends a very bad message. It is a breach of the road traffic law. Every vehicle must be registered. Every vehicle, irrespective of who is driving it. It just sends a message of predictability that this is a lawful environment. I see a lot of big men who drive unregistered vehicles. They should be arrested and prosecuted. Then, using the wrong vehicles, I see some vehicles now on some roads that in some other jurisdictions, you will not put animals in them. I will leave the matter there. But they have consequences for national development. And I see us also using the wrong vehicles for doing certain things. And therefore, we crowd out the space for investment and for development. So where there should be a truck, we now put the thing on a car. You have taken somebody's business away in an unauthorized way. So these are specters of the rule of law and order that I want to share, just to connect them that they are real life things. And the more lawful we become, the more compliant we become, the more expansive and successful we will be as a people. I have no doubt in my mind. Now, just one quick point on how law and order on road traffic impacts development. It costs lives. People die in avoidable and preventable road traffic accidents. So, in my previous parish, up until 2013, I had responsibility for federal roads, and we used to get these reports from FRSC about road traffic crashes. Incidentally, the FRSC was under the Office of the Secretary to Government. But what was interesting was that I noticed that from some of those reports, especially in the month of September and October of 2022, no less than 400 people were dying on our federal roads every month. And human capital for any nation that wants to develop to lose. It's just too much. But this is about law and order. That's a lot of manpower that is inimical to national development. Of course, let me go quickly to the improper use of road transport infrastructure. How many of us trade by the roadside?
How many of us park unlawfully on the road? All of these things inhibit free flow of traffic. What does that cause? It causes gridlock. When it causes gridlock, many things happen. The economy is not efficient. It affects our personal well-being. I lost a friend in traffic to a heart attack. Then the emissions and impact on national productivity is just something you don't want to compute. And then, of course, let us look at how we build. How many of us build and rent a skip in which we keep all the waste and bring in all the materials? Or we just dump the materials by the side of the road and it goes into the drain, and after we've built, we go away. And then a few months later, there is flooding. Did we contribute to it? How many of us are mining? And mining without the appropriate protocol, and the damage we are causing to the environment, and the impact on national development. How many of us are members of unions and associations, and how many strikes have we convened that should never have been convened? How many strikes did we convene without giving the appropriate notice? These are issues of rule of law. There's nothing unlawful about a strike if it is done properly. But these are real lives and livelihoods and impact of compliance with law and how they affect national development. Of course, I quickly go to justice. How much does it cost to get justice, and how long does it take? And what is the efficacy of arbitration? Is the arbitration award also subject to another court overview? Once we have this kind of environment, we are telling investors, don't come. And when we tell investors, don't come, we are inhibiting national development. There are red flags. But in terms of access to justice, let me just tell you a quick story before I close. And it's a story worthy of mention. It's a case that happened in 1982. It was concluded in 1986. That's something instructive about it. A case went from the High Court in Nigeria right through to the Supreme Court, and in 5 years it was finished. It's a case by one lady called Margaret Chinwe Stitch. She sued the Attorney General of the Federation. What was it all about? She had imported a car, a used car from Germany. She was Nigerian, she'd married a German, they were coming home, so she brought in a Mercedes-Benz 280. And the rules at that time, under the Federal Ministry of Finance with their act, was that you could bring in those cars. When you bring them in, come and get an import license. She complied, brought her car in, and then she was supposed to pay duty of 33%, which was 1,445 naira. For those of you who are not born then, that was a lot of money. Fast forward, they didn't give her the import license, they delayed, and they did all sorts of things. Well, she eventually paid the 33%, and later they now issued her a new estimate and said, well, the new duty now was 500%. And she was now supposed to pay 14,500. Of course, she would have none of it. They issued her a receipt saying she had only made part payment. She went to court. She lost in the High Court. They didn't give her a vehicle, of course. She lost in the High Court, lost in the Court of Appeal. But when she got to the Supreme Court of Nigeria, they found out that the customs had sold the car to Ogun State government. Ogun State government had in turn sold the car to another third party. But the Supreme Court said, don't worry, we're going to get to the root of this. Even though it's a final court, we're going to join the Attorney General of Ogun, and we're going to join that third party. Go and bring them before us. That was in this country in 1986. So when the final buyer came, he said, well, that, things have changed. He has started selling the car as parts. Supreme Court said, okay, no problem. Chief Registrar, go and inspect the car and come and file a return before us of what you see. The Chief Registrar then was a man called Mr. Toyin Keshiro. So he came, he went and filed a report, and they saw that the car had been balkanized. But fast forward, Supreme Court gave judgment in her favor. And this is the heart of the matter. They said that if the government of her country, and this is about the government not being above the law, that if the government of her country had issued policy statements and made laws, she had a legitimate expectation in believing that they will keep their word. And that's the relevance of this case. Legitimate expectation. And this is what the rule of law does, that people will act in the way that they have said they will, whether government, whether individuals. Anyway, they then sent the case back to trial for the taking of evidence, because the car was no longer what it was. So they said you should go and take evidence of the cost of replacing the car so that she could get an efficacious remedy. I move on and I ask those who vandalize electricity infrastructure, like transformers, towers, and cables, and those who vandalize telecoms and fiber equipment, whether they are mindful of the adverse impact of their conduct on our collective national development. Do you know how many young people are getting on and getting by using their phones to do business, to sell their merchandise, to communicate with their customers and their clients? They are the backbone of small businesses in this economy and in every economy. So every time you go and cut fiber cable, every time you go and disconnect electricity, you are killing small businesses in this country. Just understand it. So, and I ask those who improperly dispose of their refuse, who pollute our water bodies, whether they connect these dots to the outbreak of disease, to epidemics, and to deaths, and how many people they unconsciously cost Nigeria in terms of human capital. Have we connected the rule of law to the prevalence of preventable and avoidable diseases like polio, cholera, and measles in our part of the world? Have we? And have we considered what the prospects for overcoming these diseases can be if we just react more positively to sanitation laws and sanitation regulations? Clearly, there is no debate. Rule of law impacts national development, without a doubt. The more of it you have, the more prosperity we see, and vice versa. Ladies and gentlemen, I am done. But after I finished writing this piece, I asked one of my colleagues, because I don't use, what's it called now? WhatsApp and all of that. I use AI for road maps. I use AI on my search engine, but I don't use GPT or whatever it's called. So I asked him, I said, look, ask ChatGPT to write the same speech for me. It's a 2.5-page thing. I think I can quickly read it in 4 minutes. And essentially, it agrees with all what I have said about investment, about quality of life. I won't read it. But ChatGPT then quotes me in 4 places. In 2010, in 2012, it quotes me in 2014, and then in 2015. And then he quotes Chief Awolowo. God bless his soul. So I said to my colleague, I don't remember saying these things. I said, so go and fact check these things for me. And let me see. And ChatGPT comes back and says, well, you know, I can make mistakes. I'm not above the law. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
A round of applause, please. That was an unexpected end. Please, you might be seated. You may be seated. I wasn't expecting that end. Yeah. Oh, my God. Our next speaker is His Excellency Professor Chukwuma Charles Soludo. Professor Chukwuma Charles Soludo is a globally respected economist, reformer, and current governor of Anambra State. A first-class graduate of economics from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, he earned his master's and PhD from the same university and became a professor at just 38. Internationally, he has consulted for over 20 global institutions, including the World Bank, the IMF, the United Nations, and the Africa Development Bank. He has held fellowships in the universities of Cambridge, Oxford, and Warwick. At home, he has served most notably as the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria from 2004 to 2009, where he led one of Africa's most transformative banking reforms, winning global accolades, including the Central Bank Governor of the Year by the Financial Times and Euromoney. He holds the national honor of the Commander of the Order of the Federal Republic, CFR, with over 200 awards to his name. Since becoming governor in 2022, he has brought bold, solution-driven leadership to Anambra State with over 24 national and international recognitions. The world knows him as Mr. Transformation. In Anambra, they simply say, the solution is here. Please join me as we welcome back to the platform, Nigeria, on this special Democracy Day, Professor Chukwuma Soludo.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. What a day again. Let me say how pleased I am and to say Happy Democracy Day to all of you. And this is to appreciate Pastor Oyemade and the wife and members of the Covenant Nation for the invitation and for dutifully organizing this annual impactful event. Thank you very much for this national service. And to my colleagues, Professor Jega, the former president, I missed yours. I was rushing and still writing my thing. You see, I'm still with my laptop because even at the waiting room there, I was still writing. So forgive me, and I'm going to read quite a bit of it. And to my teacher, I just whispered to him, Governor Fashola, that I will be coming for part 2. Because when I was sworn in as governor, he happened to be one of the first persons. I went to him then as Minister of Works, to take some tutorial, because there are quite a lot of parallels and similarities between Anambra State and Lagos. Lagos has the smallest landmass, but Lagos is expanding by reclaiming the ocean. Anambra is Anambra is the second to Lagos in terms of landmass. We are shrinking due to gully erosion. We have the second highest population density after Lagos. And so quite a whole lot of parallels. So I went to him for some tutorials on how to begin. And fortuitously, the subject matter he discussed now, he told me, given the context of the time, start with law and order. Law and order. And I want to say to you, my teacher, that when you go to Anambra today, when we set up SASA, a special anti-touting squad, where we have the Ocha Brigade getting the violators of environment and so on, or we have ATMA, our Road Transport Management Agency, catching all the violators and being active and clearing the roads and so on and so forth. Well, the ones that they do right, I give you credit. The ones they do wrong, they hold me. Let me quite say that quite excited to be here as always, even though I must apologize that what you're going to hear will be quite disjointed because, like I said, even up until this, while I was at the waiting room, I was still writing. And I'm going to dutifully just read it. I haven't even reread it. I've been writing through to this morning and just come here to read. If I have punctuation errors and so on, you take it, but you'll get it after my speech. And because of where I sit now, I have to carefully just read every word because in this time and moment, I don't want to come back to say, no, I was misquoted. I don't have the liberty of my teacher here. And Prof, because I watched a little bit from the waiting room. I saw I was watching an iPad, part of your intervention. I can so see you will read and then take off to explain and so on. Whatever you say now, you have immunity anyway. So I don't. So let me get to it. I was asked to speak on rebuilding our nation. That's the title, Rebuilding Our Nation. This is a short topic, but we will need volumes of books to address. The topic itself presumes a sense of nostalgia for a nation with a glorious past, and to which we now need to rebuild. Several thoughts raced through my mind as I try to reflect on the topic. Have we had a nation? I am reminded of the famous quote by the late sage, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who argued that, quote, Nigeria is not a nation. It is a mere geographical expression, in his Path to Freedom, 1947. And during the campaign for the federal elections in 1959, Dr. Azikiwe and Alhaji Ahmadu Bello were reported to have had exchanges which reflected the fundamental differences about Nigeria among the founding fathers. Zik was reported to have told Bello, quote, let us forget our differences, end of quote. And Ahmadu Bello was reported to have retorted, no, quote, no, let us understand our differences. I am a Muslim and a Northerner. You are a Christian and an Easterner. By understanding our differences, we can build unity in our country, end of quote. But have we actually had a true country? Chinua Achebe's view was that, quote, there was a country, end of quote. There was a country. That's Chinua Achebe. From Awolowo's view in 1947 to the views of Ahmadu Bello of 1959 and Chinua Achebe's 2012, what has changed? Nigeria is said to have about 371 ethnic groups speaking over 500 languages. It is also a multi-religious country. Our current national anthem, which I love, acknowledges our differences, but with a positive affirmation of our resolve to stick together. When it says, though tribe and tongue may differ, but in brotherhood we stand. The march to nationhood is still an aspirational prayer in the last stanza of our national anthem, where we pray to God of all creation to grant this our one request to, quote, help us to build a nation where no one is oppressed, and so with peace and plenty, Nigeria may be blessed, end of quote. The point must therefore be made that Nigeria, in its checkered history, has always been a work in progress in its march towards a more peaceful, united, equitable, and prosperous nation. We need to be intentional about creating what the slogan of the National Party of Nigeria, NPN, 1978 to 1983, described as, quote, one nation, one destiny. And so consequently, it may be more appropriate to possibly rephrase the title for this intervention as, quote, creating a sustainable Nigerian nation. This should indeed be the urgent everyday conversation by all Nigerians, and I won't pretend that I can address it in a few minutes conversation. Nigeria was stitched together some 111 years ago, and within the first 46 years, our founding fathers organized and liberated us from colonial rule. In the last 65 years or so, we have had checkered experimentations to forge a nation to liberate our people from underdevelopment. I will argue that this second epoch of our liberation struggle, unquote, has not been fought with purpose-driven organizations with intent to defeat underdevelopment, nor have we intentionally created the new Nigerians to forge a new sustainable nation. That will be the thesis of what I posit here. I'm not going to write the treatise on whole Nigeria and how to get Nigeria up, but we're going to be focusing on two things. Mine will just be to provoke debate and not necessarily to provide all the answers. But before we go further, I need to make a few caveats. As we know, every Nigerian has a long list of what is wrong with Nigeria. Whenever you get Nigerians seated, everybody has his own long list. These people, the other one, I am hungry, I am this one, I have my own list too. But I am not here to rehash the book of Lamentations. I am a die-hard optimist and a believer in Nigeria's future. I apply for my current job because I believe that I can join millions of Nigerians in the search for solutions. Yes, solutions, not lamentations. I see the Nigerian cup as half full and not half empty. I carry my own Nigerianness on my head and my dress. If you look at my cap, you will see this eagle. And my dress, you see the eagle. Is the eagle on Nigeria's coat of arms. So I carry my own Nigeria on my head and my destiny, and so on. To keep my optimism going, I try a lot of the time to focus more on what is right with or working in Nigeria. Because if you don't have anything else to think about, just remember, you have the Fasholas of this world, you have Pastor Pojus, you have Jegas, and then you have the biggest refinery in the world built by Nigerian. And just remember those positive, it makes your day brighter a little bit rather than dwelling on the woes and so on and so forth. So I often focus on what is working and what is right. And you can have 100 of such that you can list. Yes, we still have a very long way to go, but we must appreciate how far we have come. Often, because unless we do, if you check Lagos Here you are, most of you here in Lagos. Check Lagos 20 years ago or 30 years ago. It's not the same as Lagos of today. After graduation, I was working at La Pal House at Coopers and Libran. Going through the traffic, and then there was no Third Mainland Bridge. And then going through the traffic and getting down to the island every day, or going through Oshodi, where you need to have a human traffic. You need to ask somebody to step out so you can put your feet. And Lagos of today, there is something to appreciate that we have come a long way, albeit that there is still a long way to go. Second, I would disappoint many who would expect me to comment on the economy. I'll start by disappointing Pastor Oyemade. Or to use this forum to offer another, quote, blueprint for economic reforms. I have access to the federal government to offer my advice, if any, and this platform cannot serve the purpose. But let's be clear, and I'm not shy to say this, that the audacious structural reforms embarked upon by the current administration of His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR have rescued the economy from the tipping point. The endorsements by the World Bank, the IMF, the London Financial Times, rating agencies such as Fitch, Moody's, etc., in my view, are well-deserved. Of course, many people know that I made a living criticizing the World Bank and the IMF. I made quite tons of money criticizing even books, which one of my books was, they told me at the World Bank bookshop, it was their bestseller at some point. As governor of Anambra, I have even rejected a World Bank loan because of the terms. But on the matter of the trajectory of the current economic reforms, the World Bank and others, in my view, are largely right. Funny enough, when these institutions criticize the government, some people use them as validation of their own criticisms. But when the same institutions give a positive report, they are derided as, quote, neoliberal, out-of-touch institutions. In 2023, I had described the state of the economy when this government assumed office as akin to a standing dead horse. And public finance was about to tip from insolvency with potential catastrophic consequences, including possible mass retrenchment of workers and or arrears of salaries and pension. You see, when the previous administration passed the 2023 budget that had a clause that subsidies will end by end of June, it was an indication we had reached the end. You could go no further. There's a limit to which you can continue to print money, to do business. And the consequences of hyper or high inflation were just predictable. I'm one of those who raised the alarms at some point, and at some point I had to say to the regime then, with the then governor of Central Bank, and I'm happy to say this publicly, in one session, coming back to rule of law, I had said to them that this printing of money, illegally, printing of naira, if the CBN Act, the provisions were obeyed, there was no time that you could have had more than 500 billion standing as ways and means. None. But they were obdurately, illegally printing money, went to 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 10 trillion, 12 trillion. That was when I said at a meeting, Governor, obey the law or amend the law. The way you are going was tipping the economy into the Atlantic Ocean. And what he said then, the response was, come and imprison me. I am helping the country. I knew that that particular act of printing money, and they printed up to 20-something trillion and poured into the system, and you expect the exchange rate to remain the same, inflation to remain the same, and so on and so forth. That's a joke. Elementary economics tells us that that was the recipe for disaster. And we met it. So when I make the point that we had, if you didn't do the kind of, subsidy removal and all of those things that had to, or dealing with the exchange rate, nobody was going to invest with the multiple exchange rate regime and the arrears that were not paying people and so on and so forth. We had reached where the economy was just standing still, couldn't move any further. And you needed a fundamental rejigging for it to begin to breathe again. And thank God, at least we're here, but still a long way to go. So public finance is back on a solvency path, and macro fundamentals are recovering positively. Yes, there are still a lot more to do, but I urge the president and his team to stay the course. Many analysts have interesting opinions, unquote, but I urge them to go deeper, conduct rigorous counterfactual analysis, and provide credible alternatives. As a friend said recently, the task is always easy, especially if you are not the one doing it. It's always easy. They should just fix power. They should just build roads. They should just... That's what somebody said to me recently. Said, no, don't do anything else. Just give us electricity. I said, as if I'm just going to go and switch on a tap. This is one country where every year people celebrate the previous year or years as the, quote, the good old days. And every new regime points out how it is the only one to bring positive change since the world was created. And I will say to you, but like every Nigerian has his own long list of what is wrong, so also is the list of, quote, expert opinions. For many, the list of what we must do would include, A, maybe restructuring the federation and a new constitution. Those are the kind of things you hear, all manner of debates going on every day. Collaborative and coordination arrangements among the three tiers of government, tackling corruption, ensuring predictable and stable macro environment, including low and stable inflation and the exchange rate, addressing security, law and order, rule of law, state policing, providing infrastructure, especially electricity and transport, food security, addressing poverty and unemployment, investing in people, health, education, and empowering vulnerable groups, prioritizing technology, industrialization, and creative economy, fully exploiting our natural resources, tackling challenges of the environment, desertification, flooding, and erosion, ethical and transformational leadership that also delivers efficient, effective, transparent, and accountable governance, etc., etc. The list is quite long. But the real challenge is how to accomplish this, especially given the binding resource constraints and the distributional consequences of any action that you take. So I won't waste your time on this. I'm sure you can add to the long list of what we must do. Somebody the other day said, I'm hungry. And I said, in the part of the world where I come from, people find it shameful for somebody to come out and be saying, I'm hungry. And so when the hunger protest also happened, I know in the Southeast, we launched a different kind of movement, farm to feed. And we say in our place, go and do something about it and not to complain about it. So these things, long list, everybody has his own. But let me return to the substance of our contribution. The nature, and that is the nature of the organization and citizenship required for sustainable nationhood and success in the second liberation struggle against underdevelopment. The first is that we must give our politics a soul by intentionally orchestrating ideologically driven political parties. And second, a new Nigerian must be born again through ethical value rebirth. I say born again, unquote. The time for both to happen was yesterday, but today is still on time because tomorrow may be too late. Let me now get on to these two ideas, and that's where the major area of my contribution to this conversation. The first is this ideological foundations for the next Nigeria, and let's give soul to our politics. Ideology is a system of ideas, beliefs, and ideals which define our worldview about the economic, social, and political organization of a society to guarantee happiness, liberty, and welfare of citizens. Individuals who share a similar ideology form a political party, organize and seek power to govern in accordance with their ideology and its consequential policies and programs. More practically, political parties are grouped as either left of center or right of center, depending on their location on the spectrum of the neoliberal progressivism to supra-conservatism. It's a spectrum. Ideological thing is a spectrum. Depending on where you fall on this spectrum, then you are classified. There are, however, different shades in between. But a political party, what is sought, must have a defined ideology from which one can even predict its possible stance or policy on different economic and social issues. Party and government policies and programs are largely derived from the ideology of the party. A political party that is ideologically driven ensures policy program clarity, predictability, and continuity. Without ideology, parties governed by whims and policies through program reversals are common even when the same party retains power. I'm trying to make fundamental argument about how ideological your core beliefs, the framework with which you do your analysis, what you believe, and from which you even derive your policies and so on. If you don't have people who share the same, on the same boat, all this our talk about policy continuity and so on and so forth, it's just, so they govern, even when within the same party. For those who call for policy continuity, they are inadvertently bemoaning the absence of ideology in party or governance. Ideology is therefore the soul of a political party. And in a multi-party democracy, it is the only way to ensure policy program continuity and sustainable progress. And just come with me. On this score, our past may be the beacon to our future. We seem to have developed backwards, as the gains of the Second and Third Republics in terms of rigorous ideological debates and struggles have literally disappeared. I invite you to review the ideologies and programs of the 5 and later 6 political parties in the Second Republic of 1979 to 83. We had the GMPP, Great Nigerian People's Party, the National Party of Nigeria, NPN, the NPP, Nigerian People's Party, People's Redemption Party, PRP, and Unity Party of Nigeria, UPN, and later the Nigeria Advanced Party of Tunji Braithwaite. I can still remember the ideologies and cardinal programs. UPN then, for example, Babafemi Awolowo was UPN. If I remember, part of the 4 cardinal programs, something like free education at all levels, free health care at all levels, comprehensive rural development, and a strong national economy. These were like, people sang them, something of this nature. I can still remember them decades. I was just getting into the university then, and in the university days, we were debating all of this. I can still remember them. All the 6 states controlled by Chief Obafemi Awolowo's UPN implemented its programs on free education and free medical services. And all the states of NPN implemented its cardinal programs of mass housing and green revolution, etc., etc. During the Third Republic, President Babangida experimented with 2 ideologically defined parties, National Republican Convention, NRC, as right of center, and SDP, left of center. Now, what do we have today? Huh? In my view, ladies and gentlemen, what we have is one party. And the name of that party, quote, Nigerian Elite PLC, NEP, with the sole goal of grabbing power and governing, unquote, as the spirit directs, or government by consultants' blueprints. Forget about the different political parties. They are, with one or two exceptions, but different factions of this Nigeria Elite PLC, largely split by quarrels over exclusion or inclusion in the, quote, dining table. Individuals who can get a seat at the table suddenly realize that, quote, nothing is working, and either form their own parties or join others to, quote, fight for a better Nigeria, end of quote. A euphemism that has become for bring me closer, end of quote. There are extremely very few exceptions, however, who are driven by principles. The two parties which control most of Nigerian states are PDP and APC. And I ask you, just think for a moment. Can you tell an APC or PDP state if you see one? I don't know if you get my drift. Can you tell if you see an APDP, a state controlled by PDP, state controlled by APC, can you tell the difference? Yeah. In the Second Republic, all the 6 states controlled by UPN, we knew, you could tell, once UPN got power, you could predict what their policies, what their programs would be, and they dutifully implemented them. Today, parties, so what is the difference? I don't know how many politicians today, because we used to debate as student activists in those days, we used to debate the different ideologies of these parties, and we used to have these politicians come on television debating their various ideologies, what they stood for. It was the intellectual wings of these parties were very active. Some of them even had ideology conclaves of each political party. Today, not anymore. So I don't know how many politicians today can hold up and explain or defend the ideologies of their political parties. Indeed, the speed with which people switch parties is a testament that political parties are mere platforms of convenient opportunism. No principles, no public purpose, only personal convenience. Even the APC started off as a marriage of convenience with the merger of ACN, ANPP, CPC, and factions of APG and PDP with the goal of grabbing power. But I dare to suggest that after 10 years of governing at the center and controlling most states of Nigeria, it is time to be very intentional about its ideological foundations. We need to be core. You need to have a core of what we can relate to. So we know what we are getting, and we can predict what the next one will be, and so on and so forth. Without strong ideological foundations, it is difficult to predict what happens. It will become, depending on who comes, throw away everything, start this one again, and go. Some will go extreme right, some will go extreme left, extreme right, or some will go even backwards, as the case may be. I have reviewed the objectives and programs of almost all the registered political parties today in Nigeria, and I can confirm that they are largely, quote, copy and paste to scale through registration by INEC. Prof. When they come for your registration, you have to have a checklist. Do you have a manifesto? Yes. Do you have your constitution? Yes. So everybody goes, you take this one. Okay, they need, what is manifesto? You go and grab the one that the other people have, turn it and change a few things. You submit. Okay, they have manifesto. Yeah. With little or no substantive differences. In substance, almost all the political parties subscribe to the social democratic ideals. That might surprise you. In terms of what they are saying in their manifesto, registered with INEC, most of them subscribe to the social democratic ideals, which means most of these parties are left of center. So ideologically speaking, there are no opposition political parties in Nigeria. any reference to, quote, opposition parties is mere semantics, and at best refers to factions of the same Nigeria elite PLC, currently excluded from the dining table. When you are excluded, you form, In many instances, the executive will still have to, quote, lobby members of its own party in the legislature to support its agenda. So in many cases, the real opposition are even factions of the same party, because they just got there, not believing in anything, not driven by anything. They're just a platform to get power, and that's it. And then we go as the Spirit directs us. Therefore, to give our politics content and their soul, things must change. Organizing Nigerians around ideological devices is a sustainable way to mobilize citizens across ethnic and religious divides. I remember then of the PRP days. Chinua Achebe joined the PRP together with Aminu Kano's party. And I remember the lecture he gave at the University of Nigeria then, justifying why he joined, and detailed ideological foundations of PRP and why he should go with Aminu Kano, not with Zig's MPP or with all the other ones that were popular, or MPN. Why the MPN was the bourgeois, the class discussions of those days, and so on and so forth. We must get back as a way to get our place. It is the surest way for a new politics to evolve from the current, quote, turn by turn or chop by chop politics to transformational politics of development that guarantees an answer to the prayer contained in the last stanza of our national anthem. I don't know how the authentic parties will emerge, but I believe that we should intentionally orchestrate them via legislation or regulation. Without this, our politics will continue to be rudderless. For me, and for us at the All Progressives Grand Alliance, APGA, we subscribe to a pragmatic progressivism, a centrist economic agenda, progressive social agenda with conservative moral values. The 5 fingers of our programs include security, law and order, infrastructure and economic transformation, human capital and social contract that seeks to leave no one behind, and then D, transparent and accountable governance with a new value system, and finally, environmental sustainability, that is effective fiscal planning and taming climate change, flood and gully erosion. For us in APGA, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of Nigeria on fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy should be the Bible and Quran of public policy in Nigeria. Chapter 2 of Nigerian Constitution provides detailed progressive agenda designed to give every Nigerian a stake in the survival and prosperity of the country en route to shared nationhood. Our policies on totally free primary and secondary education in public schools and free delivery in all, and free antenatal and free delivery in all public hospitals, which have benefited hundreds of thousands of children and women, are part of the progressive agenda, etc. So if you call for progressives in Nigeria, I will proudly raise my hands and can list a dozen or so policies and interventions of my government in Anambra that are intentionally progressive to leave no one behind. For us, progressivism is not a slogan. It is a social political movement and an ideology. It's a belief system about how society should be organized and governed. So as a first step towards a new party politics in Nigeria, let political parties unite along ideological lines, not necessarily a merger. Them unite. If you are, I'm a Catholic. If we are Catholics, we believe in the same way of celebrating a mass and so on and so forth. And then you say, my own is St. Peter's this, my own is, and that. You are the same. Come together as one. If you unite for the purposes of sustaining or moving Nigeria forward. We should awaken the spirits of Dr. Emma Okpara, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, Malam Aminu Kano, etc. In 1983, the parties with progressive credentials, Awolowo's UPN, his manifesto, if I remember, his ideology then was summarized as scientific socialism. Isaac Iwe's NPP with his ideology of neo-welfarism, and Aminu Kano's PRP, I think something like democratic humanism. They formed the Progressive People's Alliance, PPA, ahead of 1983 general elections. Their mistake was that they could not field one presidential candidate. That was their mistake. If you are all progressives and you agree that you have some fundamental underlying core that holds you together, they formed PPA, but they couldn't field a presidential candidate, and that was the mistake. So on ideological basis, go to INEC, pick up all the manifestos of our political parties, even their various websites, and study. And all these political parties, the following parties in Nigeria are largely in the same room and sharing democratic and center-left credentials. APGA, APC, Labour Party, Social Democratic Party SDP, YPP, ZLP, NNPP, PRP, and AA. Review them. They are all left of center parties. And so, my view is that all these center-left parties should form the new Progressive People's Alliance, PPA, ahead of 2027 general elections, but avoid the mistake of 1983. Unlike in 1983, the new PPA should field one presidential candidate in 2027. The Alliance of Progressive must refine and deepen the platform of progressivism and keep the flag of reforms flying. Even politicians in PDP with progressive ideological leaning may also join the alliance. Nigerians need to see progressives working together to deepen and coordinate progressive reforms across all progressive states, as happened in the Second Republic, with impactful results. The others can then organize themselves, perhaps into the conservative movement, and present Nigeria with credible alternatives to policies and directions and so on. This will signal the birth of a new politics for sustainable transformation in Nigeria. Now, if we do this and we have all those who believe the same thing, instead of saying they're bickering as if we're not different or debating Mr. A, Mr. B, let's all come together if you all believe the same thing and move this country forward for predictability, continuity, and sureness, and the people can know what they are picking from. After we finish this, the second part and the second and the last point that I says, the ethical and value rebirth towards that new Nigerian. And I ask, after fixing our politics, where are the Nigerians to play it or follow? And more often we focus on the leadership. For sure, there is a lot that is wrong with our leadership, but leadership often reflects the larger society, its values, ethics, culture, beliefs, and expectations. Leaders are products of the society, and you can't give what you don't have. Most Nigerians are, through acts of omission and commission, complicit in what ails Nigeria. We must solve it together through mass involvement and intentional social reengineering. We must deliberately create a critical mass of new Nigerians, unquote, who believe in her and are ready, if necessary, to die for her. The struggle for liberation from colonialism would not have been possible without the nationalists of the time. And the current struggle to liberate her from underdevelopment cannot be sustainable without what I call the neo-nationalists of today. No nation has prospered sustainably without the critical mass of patriotic, vigilant, and actively participatory citizenry. So, let the neo-nationalists ready to die for Nigeria raise their hands. I'm looking around. Aha. Predictably, very few. Predictably, very few. Those who are the neo-nationalists. You cannot have a nation without nationalists. Okay? So very few. And this is quite telling. So how do we raise the army of Nigerian champions to create the future we desire then? If there are very few that are willing to step out and be the ones who want to die for the country. The answer is long, but the shortest answer is to give the citizens stakes in the society by investing in their future. Examples like, current examples, what the federal government is doing, the NIL Fund, the student loan scheme by the federal government, which was also, I think, the case in Lagos here and Kaduna states, the cash transfer schemes. In Anambra, we have the 1U2 Skills program, creating thousands of our youth millionaires, a free primary and secondary education, and soon to disburse bursary program to our students in higher institutions. All these excite youths and students and could hopefully create stakeholders in the Futures project. When we set out and distributed over 2.2 million palm and coconut seedlings and other rare seedlings to over 180,000 households. And the economics is that a poor household that gets 10 to 15 of this, when it starts fruiting in 4 or 5 years, will be permanently out of poverty. It was an intentional progressive agenda to lift hundreds of thousands of families permanently out of poverty. That is how you create this stake. We must give people stake. But we must uproot the debilitating culture of corruption and the freebies and freebies. Many of you won't like this part now. The easy or free money culture and the institutions that are weaponized to sustain them. The culture that celebrates and expects something for nothing or wealth without work must give way for a culture that rewards and celebrates hard work, enterprise, and integrity. It is my thesis. It is my thesis that a society where no one asks or cares about sources of livelihood, or where most people expect, and celebrate unearned free money, is one where transactional governance will always trump transformational leadership. This dash culture, free money, and I will come in a second. There is a powerful connection between this freebies culture and criminality. Criminality including bribery and corruption, drug trafficking, oil bunkering, internet scams, prostitution, trafficking in persons, banditry and kidnapping, etc. Beneficiaries of these crimes become lords of the manor, brandishing unexplainable wealth and phantom titles for validation, while the society cheers in celebration. And surely, a society gets more of what it celebrates. For the political class, ethnicity and religion provide easy ladder to the common purse, while most of the others, especially in our superstitious society, resort to, quote, magic. Of course, there is a long thesis about how the pervasive looting of public treasury by politicians and sharing of same to the poor masses over time have numbed public sensitivities and normalized the behavior to the extent that public officers who leave office poor are derided by the same masses as being, quote, stupid. Isn't that tragic? And that's a long topic for another day. I tell you, the day I gave a lecture just a few years before I joined government, I think 2016 or 17, I gave a lecture in a university. Public lecture. The hall filled, the auditorium was filled with only lecturers. This is a very important example to give you. Only lecturers. Minimum qualification there must have been a master's degree. And after speaking for a while, I was talking about, so I was leading to a point, and I asked them a question. How would you react gave two examples. One, a minister, and I mentioned the portfolio of the minister. I won't tell you. And one, a state governor. And both of them served in government and served for 8 years. And they leave office. They were driving rickety Corolla, 2000 or whatever, before they went into office. And they leave office and went back to their car, went back to the high-density neighborhood where they were living in a 3-bedroom flat. And I asked them, what will you think of him, of these two persons? I remember the vice chancellor, who was sitting at the high table. His own reaction was, he was doing like this. And then from the audience, he must be stupid. And they say he must be a fool. Some say he must be an idiot. Someone says he must be pretending. They must be pretending. Then I rightly said, oh, I think I had somebody say that there must be sense. And everybody laughed in disbelief. For me, and I turned to them and said, if this is like a controlled experiment, what all of you are saying, the people there constituted, by the level of their qualifications and exposure, they constituted 0.01% of the Nigerian super elite in terms of their education and knowledge. If this is what you think, you are the one expecting your public officers then to be corrupt. You are demanding of them to be, otherwise you think of them as being stupid, foolish, and so on and so forth. A few days ago, I had a conversation with some people, and we were talking about somebody, and one of them was saying that the one particular guy who had served in government as a minister, oh, you know, the guy is very rich. And the person who was making this comment has no idea who this guy is. And I said, how do you know? He said, I don't remember. He was the minister in charge of this, where there were, I don't want to give an example that he gave because you might begin to guess who he was talking about. But how he was, the example he was given was because he was a minister in charge of a particular portfolio that was apparently in charge of a heavy, lot of transactions or contracts given, then he himself, he must have. If this, all the people there concurred before I interjected, something is wrong. Something is wrong. Because I say, if this is what we expect, then that's the society that you do what? That you get. And how do we break this particular nexus, as it were? Okay. There is now a clash of values regarding the principles for financial success. This is another area. The time-tested principles of hard work, enterprise, and integrity are being challenged by the, quote, get rich young or die trying philosophy of teaming millions of our youths. Institutions that underpin the new magical principles for wealth are booming. Native doctors, marabouts, and prosperity pastors promising a crown without a cross. These merchants of wealth by magic deceive millions of our youths to shun hard work, expecting dash or free, easy money. Consequently, prison yards all over the world and bushes and forests are filled with youths in search of the easy money. Also, a horde of youths throng into politics with the sole intention to loot and not to serve. Are these the youths to build a new or next Nigeria? To make progress, dear friends, we must break this vicious culture and intentionally promote ethical value rebirth. Here again, ideology comes as a compass for mass mobilization. This is a national emergency requiring urgent national conversation. current legislation that literally make the legislations that make the fight a federal government affair are inadequate. The liberation struggle must, from the clutches of corruption and challenge to the superstitious belief in wealth by magic or miracles, must be a mass movement requiring all social forces and organizations, including the churches, mosques, markets, civil society organizations, NGOs, etc. Indeed, the Nollywood has a pivotal role to play, because inadvertently, the Nollywood promoted this superstitious belief in wealth via cultism and ritual, and millions of our youths believe them to be true. Every movie that starts, you can predict how it will go, isn't it? Somebody in search of money, he will enter a cult group, and he will sacrifice somebody, isn't it? And then he will make money. And then after making money, buying assets and establishing, then he will repent. A pastor will come, and he will give his life to Christ, and all sins forgiven. But he still owns his properties. Now, that narrative for our youths is like, okay, there is an exit path. Let me first of all get it. Then I know eventually you go to a pastor, he will come and cast and bind, and everything will be forgiven. Now, and many of them are in jail all over the world. We must challenge this intentionally, and I said that we need to be, Nollywood is critical in all of this. We need them in the mental and cultural reconstruction. We must go back. I want anybody to show me somebody who has made money through this magic or so and grown wealth on a sustainable basis. If that were to be the case, I don't know, maybe these people should be the richest people on earth. The native doctors and the others who give you this and you become rich and so on and so forth, but they still need your money for themselves. They don't sit down and multiply their own money. Let me tell you, if you have 10 naira and you keep doubling it every day, in 6 months you'll be the richest man on earth. So if these things work, why aren't there the Dangotes and the Elon Musks of this world? People are going to the moon and to the distance, and these people want human sacrifice. They want baby. They want this one. They want woman. Again, connecting the dots to criminality. I haven't seen. Show me. And I'll come to that in a second, because in Anambra, we have something going on. We need a citizens' code of conduct and reinvent institutions like the SY War Against Indiscipline and Corruption, MAMSA, and mainstream them with national, state, local government, and community institutions. Our curriculum in primary and secondary schools must include civics and nationalism. In Anambra, and as part of our fight against criminality, we decided to go to the roots and seek to uproot the institutions that give the criminals a false sense of invincibility and promise of wealth by magical means. With our novel Homeland Security Law enacted January this year, we have criminalized the practice by native doctors and others that promise wealth by magical means. The use of any property for manufacture, sale, or consumption of illicit drugs, kidnapping, etc. If we get you any of these things practiced in any property, become a property offense. You can't use any property in Anambra, whether land or building, to do any of these things, and we'll take the property will belong to the state, and we'll prosecute you. We have challenged anyone to come and prove that one can be wealthy through magic. I said to them, I also need money. So if you can, if this your magic can work, come to Oka. All of us will line up. My job will be made very easy, isn't it? My job will be made easy if all persons in Anambra are billionaires. I want us to line up. Come there and show me that you do and then it will be funny if it is not tragic, but it is tragic. Because thousands of our youths are being deceived. First of all, you do these things and you tell them that if they carry drug and go abroad, the scanning machines will not detect them because you've done the charms and the stuff for them. And they go there, the prison years are filled with all these guys. I think about 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago, 23 Nigerians were executed in Indonesia, 1 from Edo, 22 from Anambra. Yes. These guys were the ones, that's what they call Okite. They do the charm for you and you become anything. And they're the same people doing it for the criminal, the kidnappers in the bush. And I'm sure these bandits and so on who get into all these things, they go to patronize these same people. And if it was so, then the native doctors or some of the pastors should be the richest people on earth. And under our law, anyone could be questioned to explain his or her source of wealth. Anyone could be. And we have also stopped indiscriminate award of phantom chieftaincy titles, especially to persons without verifiable means of livelihood. Without verifiable means of livelihood. Because the first thing they do, they get into these crimes. Either Yahoo, or whatever. You catch them. Catch hordes of youths. They're doing nothing. 9 a.m. they're in the beer parlor drinking beer. And it's drinking beer. And it's waiting for magic. The other one, they go for crusade somewhere. And hoping when he sleeps there 7 days, money will start falling from the sky. No, now. So I'm sure, Pastor, you are going to help us in this one. Pastor will help with this crusade, this one. We got to tell these guys, it just doesn't work. You know? So, the criminals and shady native doctors are on the run from Anambra. They call it also Soludo. Soludo's run that they are running. And together with the efforts of our security forces, this has brought crime rate to the lowest ever. And we believe that Anambra is now the safest state in Nigeria. We have a massive reorientation program, and I'm glad that other states in Nigeria are now copying the essential parts of our homeland security law. Because so comprehensive, we are tackling criminality at the roots, so to speak. We can't have a society this way, you know. There are those of them who do all this stuff. They finish all this, they go to the road, on the major roads where people are, and you put them along the road, and you say it is their culture. It's not our culture. We've told them, or they go to pollute our waters. All these women who dress with their red and white, they go to do all manner of things and pour into the river. It's not only an environmental crime now in Nigeria, in Anambra, we've connected it to criminality because they're also aiding and abetting these people. When you put these things into the water, somebody down the road has come to fetch water to drink and is drinking all the poison that you are pouring into the waters and so on and so forth. We must cleanse and begin a new society, a new mindset, a new society that can thrive and so on and so forth. So we have a massive reorientation program, especially challenging these superstitious beliefs in wealth through magic or miracles and systematically rescuing our youths and redirecting them back to basics, hard work, enterprise, and integrity as the proven templates for sustainable wealth. We are happy, as I said, that some states are taking this template. Our government is living by example in austere prudence, transparency, and accountability. In 3 years, we haven't borrowed a kobo, devoting 77% of our spending on capital projects, and the results of our transformation are evident. You've got to live out what you say. As a country, we must design conscious programs to kill religious and ethnic bigotry. We need a national conversation around citizenship versus indigenship versus residency. Can we create a Nigeria where state of origin or religion will no longer be a defining basis to participate or benefit from public space? A new Nigerian personality will never emerge if one is constantly reminded that irrespective of how many years or generations you have lived and even invested in a place and paid taxes all your life, you still don't belong there because you or your parents' state of, because of your parents' state of origin. You can't create the new Nigerian that will believe in this country and that can get on to do things. I remember in the First Republic, before even the First Republic, Nnamdi Azikiwe ran for election in Western region and won election into the House of, and I was almost formed the government. He would have become the premier of Western region, but for the cross-carpeting that happened then. The mayor of Enugu was one Usman, and I learned some Igbos were winning elections in Kano, and so on and so forth. We seem to have gone decades, we seem to have developed backwards. So the evolution of that Nigerian who will describe himself proudly as Nigerian and not necessarily as, oh, once Nigerians meet and shake hands, which state? Which state? And once he defines the state, that defines the person. You can never create a nation this way. We can't. And we must intentionally begin to have, like I said, part of the national conversation should also include a bureau to address grievances against the Nigerian state. And part of the process of building a nation is ongoing. Part of the process of the state that is ongoing, open, and constructive dialogue. In Anambra, we have been trying to experiment with some experiments with impressive successes. Our philosophy of governance is summarized by the slogan, one state, one people, one agenda. We do not see senatorial zones. I am from the south. I don't see the boundary between north, south, and central. We don't see the religion or religious denominations. We prioritize our programs by need, designed to lift all boats up, especially the most neglected sections of society, rather than by nepotism or patronage. The 5 new general hospitals I gave you as an illustration, the 5 general hospitals we have completed in 3 years are all in the North Senatorial Zone, the same zone of my immediate predecessor, and none in my own Southern Zone. And my most celebrated urban regeneration at Okpoko is also in the North Zone. We are prioritizing the people that are in most need, rather than where I come from. This one is my village, and so on and so forth. We have erased the tensions among Christian denominations to the extent that the Christian Council of Nigeria, CCN, including the Anglicans, Methodists, Salvation Army, etc., gave us an award, a historic award, as father of ecumenism. If you know the denominational tensions in Anambra before I assumed office, and that I've fostered over the years, you will understand what that means. And the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria, PFN, agreed. I have appointed permanent secretaries from Abia and Osun states, while my other political appointees also, in addition from Anambra, cover Kogi, Ebonyi, Imo, Delta, Enugu, and the Imo states. Indeed, the 8,115 new teachers and over 1,000 medical professionals who recruited come from 18 states of Nigeria. We must intentionally mainstream one nation with one destiny. Conscious steps. It may be subtle, but a powerful way to create true Nigerians. On dealing with religion, Nigerians have something important to learn from the Yorubas. Where in a family, the husband could be a Muslim, the wife a pastor, while the children choose their religion. Okay? My teacher here is a, when he was governor, and I said, he is Muslim, and the wife happened to be Catholic, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So how does it work? So, but my teacher here, such a level of religious tolerance should be a template for the next Nigeria. And my teacher here, the Yorubas and President Tinubu, are really a leader in this regard. I applaud that, and it should be a template for us to take. So we must stem this bigotry and focus on the person. What value are you bringing to the table? Rather than how you worship what language you speak, where your great-grandfather came from, and so on and so forth. Without that, we will never have a nation. We must think of the human person. And that actually, for me, this religion and ethnicity are weaponized by the politicians in order to have advantage. By keep emphasizing how we are different, so I am the one going to fight for you. We weaponize it in order to take advantage of the public purse. And until we get back to ideologically driven politics, where an Aminu Kano will go in alliance, Chinua Achebe will join Aminu Kano rather than join Azikiwe or rather than join anything. Unless we get there, we're just playing pranks with this. We must now conclude. Nigeria is God's greatest gift to the black race. For me, I believe that. I am a Pan-Africanist, still dreaming of the United States of Africa, with Nigeria at its core. I believe that this century is ours to claim and to dominate the next century. But it all depends on what foundation our generation lays today for our future generations. Frantz Fanon reminds us that, quote, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it, end of quote. As pilgrims here on earth, there is no time to waste. Complaints or protest is good, but better to do something constructive about the subject of complaint. For me, organization is power. And the powerful fundamental thing that we use in a democracy to mobilize and articulate the aspirations, the challenges of the people, and proffering solutions, that platform is the political party. So a fundamental step towards a sustainable Nigerian nation is for all apostles of progressive change to unite around a consolidated agenda for sustainable national rebirth. When progressives come together, let's give Nigerians a progressive agenda that everybody can relate with and that everybody can be held accountable to. For starters, all the Progressive People's Alliance PPA states should guarantee access to qualitative and truly free and compulsory primary education, as well as free secondary education and mass access to qualitative health care. For me, the UPN of Bafemi Awolowo's mantra on human capital, we need to reinvent that and make it even justiciable, in my view. They should also commit to a timeline to make key provisions of Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which contains the principles for progressive change, enforceable. This will be the badge of progressivism and the foundation to give every child and every citizen a reasonable stake in the new Nigeria. We can't ask for their patriotism if we have not invested systematically in their future. Let the conversation continue. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Like we said at the beginning and also midway, we would have the opportunity to unpack all of the ideas and insights that we received from all of our speakers today in a panel discussion. So please remember that you can join this by sending in your questions. I've already seen a lot of questions come in. Thank you to those who have sent the questions. You can still send your questions in using the short link bit.ly/the platform June 12. All of our speakers are still here and will participate in the panel session. Just before we cut to the panel session, as we set up, stand by for a broadcast from the Platform Nigeria studio.
Absolutely. And for me, I was reminded of accountability. You know, just like you said, most of the time we usually think, oh, everything is the government. The government needs to do this. The government needs to do that. But even when policies are in place, if we do not follow those policies, you see that nothing happens. So we also have to be accountable to ourselves as, you know, individuals in the society and ensure that we do the things that we need to do when no one is looking, right? And I've learned a few things. We have Bolaji. You know, Bolaji will be speaking with us shortly, right, to really talk about the fact that, you know, maybe a few things that he's going home with today. Hello, Bolaji. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you too?
Well,
Hello.
We are here, June 12th. We are grateful for how far the nation has come. I have a question for you. The first question is, are you politically conscious as a young Nigerian?
Of course.
You are?
Of course.
Okay, the question is simple. What does it mean to be politically conscious as a young Nigerian?
All right. Thank you very much for that question. I mean, I have been politically conscious since before I entered the university. So it means understanding that every action of your political leaders has an effect on your current reality and also on your future. So therefore, I mean, you have a responsibility to follow all of their actions, also follow what's happening in just the news, the government, politics, and everything, and trying to understand, okay, the action of, let's say, the governor, this action of this governor, what would it mean on my future, and what does it tell on my reality? So that's what it means to be politically conscious.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Interesting. So if you were the president of Nigeria today, what is the first change that you think you would make within our country?
All right, thank you very much. I think that is on education, and not just speaking education just like that. It speaks on the content, what are we learning in school, and also what infrastructure do we have that supports learning in school, and education across all levels, from the primary education to secondary to tertiary. And aside from what we learn in classroom, also the civic education is also important, which is one of the things we are here to learn at the Platform Africa.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been, you know, great speaking with you.
It's a pleasure.
All right. Enjoy the next session.
Thank you very much.
I think that we have to go back to the auditorium now to continue. Yes, Tosin.
Absolutely. Let's go on. We still have a panel session coming up, so you definitely want to stay tuned. We're going to have a deeply insightful and enriching conversation. So see you at the main stage.
Yes, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Just on the rule of law and how we use our digital infrastructure. So about 3 days ago, there was news came out that someone had a cub, a lion, in a building in Victoria Island. It was carried on the news, channels showed it, and the police said they've invited the man to come to their office. The estate agent said the man signed for it to be a residential building, and they were basically looking for the man. And I was asking myself a question. This man paid rent. He paid using an account. That account has a BVN. BVN has name, phone number, picture. Why are we looking for the man? So the question I wanted to ask is, as a former governor of Lagos State, how are we using our digital infrastructure to improve the rule of law? Why should the police be looking for a man that has BVN and all those details? Thank you.
Well, I think that just speaks to the quality of human capital in very critical aspects of our lives and by extension, national development. Because as you rightly said, in the best societies, nobody can thrive on anonymity. If you are anonymous, you will be shut out of that society. And that is the whole idea of BVNs, NINs, and all of that. So it's surprising to me. Unless, of course, the person has taken flight, which is possible. But even then, the person can't just disappear. Because you would then be able to monitor, for example, whether he's operating his account and whether he's operating his telephone device, as to be able to then say this person is operating from here. So it's a question of the capacity that exists in that regard. But the person can't disappear.
My question goes to Her Excellency, Dr. Ameenah. You started on with this very eloquent intervention around education and its connectivity to national development through R&D innovation. In Nigeria, we seem to have we always call it a unique situation. Today we have far more private universities than government-owned universities. We also have a situation where it would appear that a number of the lecturers in these government-owned universities also double as lecturers in the private universities. When it comes to research and development rankings, the leading university, University of Ibadan, is in perhaps the rank of 4,000 or thereabout in a list of over 9,000 universities ranked in the world. What exactly are we not getting right in terms of research and development? How do we bridge town and gown and ensure that this R&D actually takes us to national development?
Thank you for this question. I'll tackle the first part, which is the ranking. The ranking of universities is very often by virtue of output of the academic staff. And the output is measured in terms of publications, and very often the publication have to be in some what we call high-impact journals. And by virtue of the output of the faculties, by virtue of the output, and of course the visibility, the ranking will go up. So I think the homework has to be done within Ibadan, you mentioned, because that used to be a flagship institution for Nigeria. And I'm very surprised that you're saying that the ranking is 4,000 or 9,000 universities. So something has to be looked at to see what is happening. And this links up directly to the next part of your question, which is the research and development not making impact. This is something which is very common, which is very true for many institutions, not just in Africa, but many parts of the global south. I increasingly now refer to them as the global majority because I don't like the global south very much. This is because these result finding from institution, they somehow do not cross the valley of death because they don't get the necessary funding so that they can really create impact at the level of the communities. Having said this, so this is one of the areas that needs to be addressed because having looked at the negatives, I must say that Nigeria is perhaps one of the few countries in Africa that already has about 10 unicorns. So things are not so bad when you look at it globally. But increasingly, we must look at two things. First, getting the ideas to traverse the valley of death, go to make enterprises, and enterprises become job creators. That's a very important issue. The second point is that many of the publications of African researchers, they end up in the gray literature. And when they end up in the gray literature, they're not very visible to the outside world. But still, if you dig out a lot of this gray literature, you'll find that you actually can create impact at the level of the community. So it depends again on the leadership of your institution, leadership of the Minister of Higher Education, to see to it that these results are applied within the community to create impact, and at the same time, look for government involvement more and more, because at the end of the day, whether we have private sector leading the way, we still need government in terms of regulation. And if we can find this right recipe to bringing in the investment for these researchers, for these budding entrepreneurs, Africans will become job creators and not just job seekers.
Thank you very much. Next question will be for Professor Jega. You spoke a lot about, strengthening democratic institutions and some of the pitfalls. Now, last week, about a week ago, someone tweeted that if not for him, the president of one of the biggest countries in the world will not have become the president because of the amount he spent. He's not a Nigerian. Now, just bringing it home, Kama has a rule of shadow directors. They are directors, they are people who are not on the board, but exert influence on the company. Given what we've seen in the political space, do you think we need to have shadow, like Baba Sokwe, shadow people? How do we regulate this political space domestically? We know people appoint people. Just part of domestication of our laws. We've been dealing with it for 26 years. Just like Kama, should we have a way to also regulate them because we know they exist?
Thank you very much for the question. If I understand the question well, I think that regulation is good, but it has to have a clear framework, and it has to be transparent. So the idea of shadow regulation, to my mind, we should do better. If we are going to regulate, let's regulate quite effectively, rather than use an undercover or underhand process. With regards to the issue of it's a different matter if individuals want transparency and accountability and want to establish a structure through which they can monitor what is happening in the governance space. As you know, it's in the news, the issue of Pat Utomi and his colleagues and the security agencies who thought that this is something that shouldn't happen in a presidential system and so on. To my mind, civil society organizations can establish structures, and monitor what is going on in government for the purposes of transparency. So long as what they are doing is very clear, there is a clear framework, I think it's a problem.
Thank you very much, Prof. Your Excellency, Governor Soludo, I have a right of response to a few things, and I can just recap on that. He talked about strength. Since you are sitting beside your teacher, perhaps you in democratic institutions, he talked about legislature, and also talked about, there's one more, but those two particularly are the ones I wanted to address. That what are your views to this? Are these actually strengtheners of the democratic institutions? And more importantly, who should lead the charge in that kind of intervention?
Immunity clause and...
part-time legislature, especially at state assembly, he said.
Well, I thought, since I have the liberty, the advantage of having my teacher beside me, should have just passed it on to him, and you are nearer to him.
We have a special question for him as well.
You are closer to him with the mic. But anyway, I think this is Governor Fashola's point about this, that any of this will also have consequences. I'm not quite sure that this debate has been going on, and I've had my own, I'm in politics, but I'm not politician in that sense of speaking five sides of the mouth. This view is a view that I held And I have had it before I came, and I still have it. I have these views. Now, the issue of part-time legislature is simply an admission of the unseriousness of the legislature. Because if the legislature does its job, okay, of legislation, of oversight and representation, if it's very effective at this, there is a whole lot to do, as the agenda is heavy. And currently, for example, at the national level, I think they sit 3 days or something a week or so. In my state, okay, they're meeting literally Monday through Friday, because we have dozens of executive bills. They are very busy working on them. Now as they are finishing, we have pies that they keep working, having public sessions, going on oversight. Over all manner of stuff, and it all depends. If the legislature is functional, effective, it has ample work to do, in my view. Nevertheless, however, let me put a footnote, which is subtext to this. And that is what my former boss and former president of Nigeria used to tell us when we were in government. In his government, every time he used to say, each one of you, you must have a second address. That anybody and everybody in government must have a second address. In fact, he told us then that the person he spent the longest time on the phone with every day was his farm manager. Okay? And almost every other weekend, if you wanted to see him, you go to Otta. And one day I visited him and he had to take me around to see the place, and we went to see one pig that was ill. And he knew which one was sick as president of Nigeria. So, I guess part of it is the issue of what else, what are the other sources of livelihood other than, depending on this. Because when somebody has come into this position with nothing else, absolutely nothing else, and the remuneration is quite a pittance, then it begins to raise the question as to whether we could otherwise, make it part-time so that he can devote more time to other sources of livelihood. I see the argument in that regard. But for me, what I said to politicians who are coming into office, I said, better have something else that was ongoing before you. But if you are looking for this as a source of livelihood, it's going to be very, very tough, extremely so. I became governor of Anambra, and as my teacher knows, he knows what the salary is. When they came to me for my said to bring my account number, and I asked them, what's the salary? And they showed it to me. I said, no, it must be wrong. Something 100,000 is my salary. I said, no, this must be, it must be, go and check. And they went and checked and came back. Meanwhile, in the previous year, before I joined in, the tax I paid to the state government happened to be very multiples of what they were now going to be paying me. So I decided to say, I said, now, wait, I'm coming. I have not received a kobo in payment in protest of that payment. So there is the issue of remuneration, requiring people to now have something else to do rather than this as effective. But there is a conflict, which is effectiveness of the job. If you leave that as a part-time, then the job of the legislature will never get, in my view, will never get done. That's number one. Number two, for executive thing about immunity or non-immunity, as a person, I'm indifferent. Personally, if it is for me, I will say, please, remove it like yesterday. Because if you have nothing to fear, we'll try as much as possible to do it the best way we can. However, the other side as well is that there is a cost to it. and which is that people can get you bogged down with all manner of frivolous suits, frivolous anything. You say something to somebody, they sue you in your personal this thing. You go and start answering. Before long, you have somebody's, you enforce right of way, and you get things, they sue you. And you start going to answer, hire lawyers to answer suit cases, 500 cases, 1,000 cases, in your personal capacity as an individual. I'm not quite sure how that is going to work and how you are going to do the job as governor. So, neither here nor there, in my view. I'm not quite sure it strengthens anything. But if anybody commits a crime, you wait for the person, in my view. Wait for the person, maximum 8 years. You're out of it, and you prosecute for a crime, so to speak. But while you're on the job, please get the job done. But at a personal level, I'm indifferent. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you. The next question, Professor Soludo, Your Excellency, is also for you. Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're one of the states that has made giant strides, your educational reform. When Professor Jega was speaking, he said INEC should have tested the technology equipment they use for the election very well. We saw what happened with JAMB. Now, WAEC is also saying they're going to start CBA testing this year. 1.9 million students. For the JAMB one, they said something was also not well tested. What is your view on this JAMB debacle? On the JAMB incident? What's your view on it?
That's when you want to put me in trouble. Because, Anambra happened to be one of the places where there were hiccups, as it were. And finally, that was resolved to the glory of God. Let me say this. Technology is upon us. We cannot, for any failure, I will make 2-3 quick points. We cannot, because of failure of one experiment or the other, then say the response is to go back to analog system. No, that's not the response. I remember when in the late 80s, when I bought my V-boot that was supposed to be automatic. And when it had a problem, I took it to my mechanic, the man that was said to be the expert in fixing Mercedes. And his suggestion was, that the problem is this automatic thing. That if I permit him, he was going to change the system and take it to manual. That manual was the real one that didn't give up. So he will have to downgrade me technologically because that's the one that he knew and trusted. I want to say that we must embrace technology. That does not undermine the fact that we need to do a lot of preparations. Stress testing is very important. You think it through. What is it supposed to be? Stress test it, stress test, and stress test. My recommendation is test once, test twice, test 3. Not just once, not twice. And to get it well. We prepare, we put out the resources to make sure that they are enough. And then where do you deploy them and make sure that the other ancillary services, such as access to network, actually will function in that place? Again, test, stress test, and stress test. Going back to the analog system, in my view, is not the solution. Every mechanical thing, technology-wise, we must also give a margin of error. I have a background, my forte, part of when I used to be, I don't know, in my previous life, numbers, statistics. I look at the margin of error. Okay? Is it 30%? Is it 3%? Is it this? And if you've tested that over a period of time, are we improving or are we retrogressive? Maybe the first time you tested it, the error was 10%. Then you try to improve and it's minimized to 2%, to 1%, to 0.1%, and so on and so forth. If we are making progress that way, For me, that is it. But to assume that it will be an error-free system with mechanical device, it's impossible. You can even pull out a brand new car from a garage and you get home tomorrow, it doesn't start. There is that probability. Boeing and brand new aircrafts crashed. There can always be something nice. But the only thing is that we must intentionally prepare to make sure that technology doesn't fail. Embracing technology, there's no substitute to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to pick up on that point, Your Excellency, on embracing technology, I'll come to Mr. Fashola. Your Excellency, I know you gave a disclaimer, the same thing that ChatGPT usually says at the end of its search. But as governor of Lagos, two-time governor of Lagos State, I believe you can relate with this experience. And my family and I, just this last Muslim holiday, we decided to go to the Badagry beach, close to the Seme border, on the Badagry-Seme road there. And those states and non-state actors you talked about, we counted about 30 actors or actresses, roadblocks on both sides of the road. And my point is, just talking about technology, isn't there, because every one of them will tell you they have a reason for being there. Every agency of government will say they're inspecting something, that could be smuggled in or smuggled out. Isn't there a technological solution to this?
I am in retirement now. And I think that is what Governor Charles Soludo is looking forward to. When he came in and they were reading his citation, they showed that he became a professor at 38. And I told him that's too much akukwo. So, maybe he might help us with the problems now, because they understand the language that those people are speaking. I left 2 years ago. But seriously, there is it's a trade-off. We don't want stops and searches, but data will show that they have yielded troves of evidence. They have yielded very valuable apprehensions. But how do we find the balance and migrate from only those physical methods? And I think that's the point you raised, and it's to ask, what are they looking for? They're probably looking for people who are purveying arms illicitly, for example. What is the possible technology by which we can probably apprehend a car that is carrying in its boot somebody who has been kidnapped, except perhaps some of those random searches? But in the event, we then have people who have no authority at all to be on the road, and they erect obstructions in the way of commuters. Of course, there will be a mixture in some places and totally a separation in other places. I honestly can only recall that in the time that I was governor, we had a problem like that across the country that we discussed at the National Economic Council, and then we resolved that all governors should work within their zones to curtail, bring down, or reduce the number of these illegal roadblocks, because they were translating to very measurable increases in cost of services cost of food, and cost of living. And I think that we succeeded in the main at the time. And I think it's something to go back to now, to review what is necessary, what is unnecessary, and also as commuters, as citizens, the presence of law enforcement on the highway offers a measure of confidence as we encounter them. But they must not then become the point of pauperization, if you like, as they extort or people do that. So there's a trade-off somewhere. And if there's technology that helps to then address some of what they do or all of what they do, and we can, as it were, dispense with them, bring it on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next question is for President Ameenah. So Africa has about maybe 10, 11 unicorns. 30% of those unicorns were started by people who schooled locally in Nigeria. Now, over the last 26 years, we've had about 160 private universities. But there's an issue with the jobs. So there was an article in Bloomberg yesterday or 2 days ago which said African MBA students, as a share of applications coming into the US, has grown from 4% in 2019 to 27% African applicants by 2024, led predominantly by Nigeria and Ghana. The reason they gave for that is that the African economies are churning out a lot of graduates and the domestic economies cannot provide enough jobs for them. So as we embark on educational reforms, how do African economies create the atmosphere, the environment to create enough jobs for these people? Because even the ones we have now, we've got a problem of getting them employed.
Thank you. You know, Africa's population by 2050 would be about 2.5 billion. And if you look at the percentage of young people, we are talking about those with the median age of 14 to about 20, 24. So the issue is there in terms of what increasingly people are referring to as the youth dividend. Now, and if you put that globally, if you look at the European continent, it's aging. Japan is aging. So this continent has the ability to be the supplier of manpower to the whole world. But Africa also needs her own manpower for her own development. Now, what kind of development do we want? There are economies, for example, if you look at a country like Austria, if you look at a country like Switzerland, for example, they have not gone into tertiary education, PhDs and all that. They have focused at a certain level. And if you look at the entrance in Switzerland, for example, a PhD program, you find it is quite a small percentage. So what we will have to do here on this continent is look at the creative sector, but not forgetting as well, we heard a lot about technology, what technology will do in terms of a disruptor for jobs. So there has to be a big rethink of the productive sectors which will absorb a lot of these manpower. The other thing is that while we are producing so many graduates, what are the absorptive capacity of various sectors? Again, I'll come back to this issue of sectors like science-related, IT-related, you name it, production. And so we're going to have a rethink. But I think one sector, and I keep saying this, it may sound like a broken record, where Africa stands to really make an impact is the sector of agriculture. If you look at the entire value chain, we really have a potential to make a dent because A, we'll become food sovereign, and I'm not using the word food security here, I'm using food sovereignty. The second thing is that if you start transforming at all levels through innovative practices, we can create lots of jobs for our youth. And don't forget, these are the figures from the African Development Bank, that the sector of agriculture is already a $1 trillion business. That's one thing. If you look at the sector of energy, we've had many companies operating. We've seen, for example, Mkopa, for example, in Mali that had started for energy. So we need to be able to provide energy to 600 million people every day on Africa that go without electricity. So the potential is there. But how now do we actually articulate our decision-making, our strategy to bring energy, to bring water, to bring food? And this morning I was reading something which was amazing. 50% of Africa's water is located in a country called DRC. 50%. And yet we find that so many other areas in Africa, they are without water. So let us get back to basics. Let us look at what we have in terms of strength, what we have in terms of weaknesses. And increasingly, we need to convince operators, we need to convince many stakeholders to come and invest in Africa. Why it matters to invest in Africa, then you solve the immigration problem. And this is something that we have to be worried. I mean, while people talk about immigration, automatically people look at people dying in the Mediterranean. But immigration is happening intra-Africa, and nobody is talking about it. So we need to really strategize to develop key sectors that will create jobs and that will empower young people as well to become job creators. And technology actually has the means of doing that. And there are many good examples. I won't have time to go into all of it, but telemedicine, where people don't have access to doctors, and yet there's so much that can be done. Drone technology for delivering resources to places which are really remote. All these are tried and tested examples, but we're going to have a rethink at the level of the continent to see how we can transform our human resource into human capital and create jobs for our youth. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, before you put down the microphone, the next question is also for you. Yes. You have to agree that we have to touch on this subject. Democracy is about inclusion. You were, as the first female president of your country. In Nigeria, where we are, perhaps the legislative representation, female legislative representation, is still probably under 6% of the total number of lawmakers at the federal level. In the past 3 or 4 months, there has been a back and forth between a certain male legislator and female legislator. We still do not have a female state governor, and I have 1 wife and 3 daughters. What are we afraid of? Just to put it clearly. Thank you.
Well, I will start with a cliche. I'll say that a bird cannot fly with 1 wing. So a bird, it cannot fly with 1 wing. So if we really want the economy of any country to move, we're going to have to be as inclusive as possible. And we have also good examples. I'll go back to one country, Rwanda, for example. It had started with a genocide, 1994. And the country has really brought in, I think it's one of the countries in Africa with the highest representation of female. Next one, I think, is South Africa and Ethiopia. And if you do a correlation, you'll find that these countries that have been inclusive, that have included many more female, these countries have been more prosperous, right? And they have moved very, very fast. So I think we just have to come and walk the talk. And if you say we're going to be inclusive, let it not be a slogan. Let it really become a reality. And for your daughters, just like I have daughters, like I was a daughter at some point as well, there's one thing that we're going to have to teach our girls. We're going to have to teach them to take risk. I did. I took risk, right? Then the second thing I have in terms of messaging, and it may sound funny, marry well. Choose your partner. While behind every man's success there is a woman, behind every woman's success there is a family. So we need the supportive husbands. We need them to actually bring them on board. Now, the other thing I just want to quickly react on, you mentioned democracy, right? Democracy is a word which has been used and abused, right? What do we really mean by democratic process? Very often people say, oh, free and fair election. Yes, that's one component. The other component is good governance, has been mentioned so many times before. It means an independent judiciary. It means a free media, precisely to address the issue of free speech. It means many things, and it is not only the power to go and vote. That's fair enough, you can vote. But if you stick to just the voting and you ignore the equal opportunity, the freedom of speech, independent judiciary, media, all these, then you just become electoral democracy. We had independence, we've had flag independence. It applies to so many parts of Africa. So let us not make democracy just becomes an electoral democracy. Let us make it work so that it becomes really inclusive and it really brings people on board together. Thank you.
Much. Thank you. Professor Jega, the next question is for you. I remember when you were chairman of INEC, you introduced the use of university professors as electoral officers. I mean, you said for them to have passed through the system, they must have some level of integrity. And I think in 2019, you also criticized, how they had gotten involved in some corrupt practices. I think at the last count, 2 of them have been jailed. Just given your experience from an electoral perspective, do you think we should still be using these university, dons for this process, given the antecedents? That's the first question. Number 2 is, from an inclusive perspective, Nigeria, we have BVN, we have the voters card, we have all these things. And a lot of youths feel that just looking at where we are from a technological perspective, why can't we have electronic mobile voting like some countries like Estonia? A lot of people feel that's the easiest way to get inclusion. Can you just give your thoughts on those 2?
Thank you very much. I will start with your second question. I think we have to understand the need to make haste slowly. We want to scale up the use of technology. But if we do a realistic assessment, we see that there are a lot of gaps in technology infrastructure which will constrain how far you go in terms of the use of technology. So, Estonia, yes, they use internet voting and so on. It's a very small country, but of course they are more advanced in terms of the infrastructure that can help use technology. In Nigeria, you are still struggling with internet service, even in some major cities, in certain areas, not to talk about our rural areas, which are terribly underserved. So if you want to say, you can't even contemplate that. Secondly, there are serious challenges. We are not even an equipment manufacturer. And you need certain levels of relative independence, in terms of what equipment you can produce. Otherwise, you become hostage to some equipment manufacturers, and it affects the extent to which you can use technology. So that's why I say we need to make haste slowly. There is a lot that we need to do to invest before we can go. People talk about after the 2015 elections, people thought by 2019 we should be using electronic voting. The Indians are still not using electronic voting. They are using something like mechanical voting, and their equipment manufacturers, they have better technological infrastructure than we do. So really we need to make haste slowly. Everybody recognizes that we need to upscale the use of technology, but we have to make sure that we don't take a jump in which there are no steps. You know, you end up really not getting the value that you require in terms of using technology. So my argument is that it's possible, for example, to insist that, and we've started that, by 2015 up to 2019, there was no legal framework for even piloting electronic voting. The Electoral Act expressly prohibited electronic voting. It is only in 2022 that was removed. You know, so, and not much has happened in terms of improvement of the infrastructure that you would require to be able to do that. So frankly, yes, we should do that, but we should make haste slowly. It's not something that can happen immediately, and we have to be very, very careful about that. With regards to using academic staff and Prof, first of all, one of the challenges we have in this country is that people are looking for minor faults which they can overblow. In each election, we use thousands of university professors and senior lecturers, in some cases even lecturer ones, you know, because we use them for compilation of results and declaration of results at the constituency levels. Now, the people prosecuted, you mentioned two, is statistically insignificant, but that is what the media will hype on. You find two people who have committed an offense, it is what goes in the news, and it is used to make it appear as if all the other professors are fraudulent, as it were. You know, so frankly, even corpus that we've been using, we use in an election, the last election, over almost 1 million corpus. You know, how many of them were prosecuted? Maybe 10, actually caught with irregularities. You know, but then people will say all the corpus are complicit in terms of the fraudulent activities that happen. So frankly, we had to use professors, let me say opportunistically. What happened was that at the time I came into INEC, the resident electoral commissioners were the ones who were declaring governorship election results in the states. And the electoral officers at the local government levels were the ones who were actually declaring results at the local government level. These are the same people who, before an election, will deploy, will distribute materials, would be responsible for, will be responsible for retrieval of election materials, and it's very, very clear that, and at the end of it, they will now come and sit overnight and collate the results and declare results. It was, in the first place, humanly impossible. In the second place, because they are INEC officials, they turned it into clearly a money-making venture. So when we came, we said we had to deal with that problem. If you are an electoral officer or a resident electoral officer, busy yourself with the preparation and the conduct of election and the retrieval of election materials, which will be required for litigation after results are announced. But you cannot come and sit overnight and declare results of the election. So where can we get people who can help us do that. And that was how the university people came in. I tried ASU. ASU said they are not going to touch elections. It's going to mess up their integrity, because election was terrible at the time we came into INEC. And I was lucky I had been a co-chairman of the Committee of Vice Chancellors before I went to INEC. So I now use the Vice Chancellors to help us get academic staff using a good, transparent selection criteria, and they will vouch for them. And that's how we started using academic staff in the election. And up to 2015, in fact, after the 2011 elections, the MBA, the, engineers, not Koren, the professional,
the
NSC, yes. They all came, they said, well, they also wanted to participate after the 2011 election. But we said, look, when you are doing something and it works, why change it? So we stuck with the professors, and I can tell you frankly, the level of integrity they brought to the election. A vice chancellor who had served 35 years in the university system, who has actually become a vice chancellor and has just a few years to retire, substantial, overwhelming majority of them were not going to damage their integrity that they built over the years on the matters of election. Of course, politicians use all methods of inducement, but the fact that only about 2 professors, not to talk of vice chancellors, professors have actually been prosecuted for electoral offenses, frankly, is statistically insignificant. It's terrible that it has happened, but I don't think it's something you can use to say that we shouldn't use those people who added value to the election.
Follow-on question from online. When you were speaking about, make haste slowly, someone typed in the question online that, but when we were doing trader money, we were using mobile to send it to people.
No, I think, okay.
Said we're using mobile to send it to people. So I think that from a mobile perspective, are you saying we should give it some time? In your view, are you saying, look, maybe we'll give it 5 years, 6 years, 7 years or something, but should it be something we're looking at?
Of course, now that the ban has been lifted, it's now for INEC to begin to, first of all, look at what technologies are available, which technologies are adaptable, and which ones can they even start to pilot tests. For example, in cities, maybe in Abuja or in elections of professional associations, you can deploy some electronic voting systems to begin to pilot test them. But don't make the mistake of saying because individuals use OPay and other mobile systems for personal transactions that you can use that for elections. The security, the cyber security will not be there. All the results will have to be channeled into a particular system, database, and all coming at the same time. Mobile technology in which you use for financial transactions by individuals, you cannot envisage to use that for elections in Nigeria as of now. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Our time is up. We've actually... by the authority of the convener, we have another lease of life, if you like, and another round of questions for everyone. And I think the way I want to put it is, as your parting shot, I know Professor Jega had argued against authoritarian reversal, but I would like to ask, let's assume, in a utopian democracy, all the stars are aligned. You have the powers of the legislature, the executive and the judiciary, what one thing would you do to improve the democratic process in Nigeria? And as the professors will say, discuss, 20 marks. Professor Jega, over to you, sir. And then we close.
Frankly, we shouldn't joke about the possibility of authoritarian reversal. And that's why we all have to be engaged to ensure that the conditions, the possibility is checkmated. First of all, there is what scholars call global resurgence of authoritarianism. And we can see it even in places like the United States of America. In countries like ours that have had a long history of military rule, that are being constrained by the legacies of military rule in the practice of democracy, and in which our politicians are so reckless and so short-sighted, in the way in which they practice democracy, the possibility is always there, as I said, like a sword of Damocles hanging over us. So we have to take it serious, and we all have to be involved about how we can improve, deepen the democratization process, improve democratic mindsets and the value reorientation, and the strengthen institutions so that they can actually be strong enough to withstand the challenges that politicians pose with their authoritarian disposition. So we really need to pay attention to that. Of course, there are no easy solutions, as many of us say, but we just have to keep on improving. We must never allow that to happen. There are always opportunistic people lurking around, even amongst the politicians who lose out, who, if we are not part of it, they'll let somebody else come in. And it's a very, very serious challenge when they can mobilize religion, they can mobilize ethnicity, So all these are serious dangers that really we must pay attention to. And to my mind, value reorientation, which Soludo spoke about, strengthening institutions, and of course mobilizing citizens for active engagement in the political process, in order to keep on improving the integrity of the process, I think is very, very important. And civil society organizations have a responsibility also in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Jega. Your Excellency, Dr. Ameenah.
I think the previous speaker has summed it all very nicely. I should say the stars may be aligned, but I think it's still work in progress. And we need to engage more and more with civil society. But more importantly, we have to agree that politicians come and go, but institutions stay. And it is through institutions that we will drive democratic process changes, because this is how, when we live up to the values and, of course, to all the salient features we have discussed about strong democracy, we can only do it through the power of institutions. And let us get engaged. Let us apprise our young people. Let us get them on board as well. Let them trust the system. And that is very, very important. Increasingly, the civil society must increasingly trust institutions. When this happens, and if you lose trust in your institution, forget it. It's going to be chaos. So let us keep on building trust in our institution. Let us live up to the values of democratic processes. And this way, we can be assured that generation upon generations coming after us will ensure that they live up to the expectations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Governor Fashola, we'd like to take you on word, and then we'll close with His Excellency, Governor Soludo.
Well, I think that the only thing I could usefully add is to reiterate the thesis of my intervention, which is that we must remain eternally vigilant about the deepening of the rule of law and the dominion of law and order. All of what has been said about institutions, about compliance and all of that just requires the enthronement of law and order. It is impossible to assume that we would have a perfect collection of compliant people in every community, club, village, or society or country. But it is law and order that enables us to ensure that there are consequences to their deviant or non-compliant behavior. And it is law and order that enables us to protect ourselves from those who want to harm us, either by putting them away through the judicial process and confining them in a correctional institution. Whether or not we can speak freely, we should not assume that there would not be people who would threaten those rights. It is the enthronement of law and order that finally protects those rights in a way that sanctions and inhibits those who threaten it. So, in 2 words, law and order.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Your parting shots.
On the same one?
On the same.
Oh, thank you very much. I thought that they have finished the summary, and mine is just to thank you very much and thank Pastor again for this wonderful opportunity and for this national conversation. For me, put it this way, put it almost like as a slogan: participate or stop complaining. You know, participate or stop complaining. There is no substitute to it. There is absolutely no. There's a eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And in my presentation, I did talk about this vigilant and participatory citizenry. There is no way you are going to build a nation on a sustainable basis without the active participation of citizens who are informed. But just going back to the point I made, but you have to participate with a compass. You have to participate with a compass. And so let's begin to organize people. If you like, I talked about the neo-nationalists, those who believe, those who have certain values, some principles about how a society should be organized and governed, must come together as a block, because organization is power. And if we don't, you'll be taken one by one. So first, those who are for, those who are here, left or right or center and whatever, let us organize with a compass. But when what drives that organization is transaction, rather than the quest for transformation, because the 2 T's are in conflict: transactions versus transformation. And more often, the transactional component seems to be the one that is dominant. And that is why it is very easy to pick people very easily. Once you dangle a few things, everybody, a lot of people will align on one side. Once you dangle the carrot, as it were. In that way, it will become difficult. But if there is a belief system, an ideological core that becomes the organizing framework, the compass for our organization, it will be easier for us to be able to stay the course and say, never again. Only those who believe and only those who dare to participate can preserve this democracy, deepen it, and get it to flourish for a nation state that we all crave for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can we give our speakers another round of applause? Thank you very much, sirs. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please keep appreciating them. We've truly, truly been honored to experience what I call a masterclass, a free masterclass in democracy. So as we demonstrate as a sign of honor, let's allow all of our speakers, as they are ushered into the green room, as we keep applauding in appreciation for the contributions we have so graciously received from them this morning and afternoon. Let's keep the applause going as we say a very big thank you to all of our speakers. And of course, please, a round of applause for yourselves. You have been the most excellent audience. Thank you so much for your presence here. And also thank you to all of our participants online. We'll say once again, Happy Democracy Day, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Have a wonderful day.
Brothers and sisters from Nigeria, Happy Democracy Day. From one democracy to another, from Mauritius to Nigeria, with all the love and all the friendship and all the brotherhood and sisterhood, have a great day today.